Hey everyone, it's AC back for part 3 of our Echo Bike ASR testing series. If you haven't, make sure you watch part 1 with why we do our ASR testing and part 2 with how we do the ASR testing on the Echo Bike. So to jump into it, we take the results from the test that we talked about in our previous 2 episodes. So if we're looking at the 3 max output tests in the ASR Bike Calculator that we built out, we put in your results of max watts from rep 1, rep 2, rep 3. In this case, this individual hit 1600, 1800, 2000. And on their max aerobic speed test, they hit an average of 200 watts for the 5 minutes. Again, this is just an example. Most people will not be near that high of watts for the output. And depending on the sport, they probably will be higher for the average watts. An important thing to note, if you haven't really thought through that, body size is going to play a huge factor in the watt outputs. I'm not a large individual. For those of you that know me, I'm like 5'4", 5'5" on a good day. I'll call myself 5'4", and like 165 pounds. My average watts is barely above that, and my max watts is just barely over 1,000. There are larger individuals who can and will hit 14, 15, maybe 1,600 watts on the max output tests. And for the average watt test, they could possibly get to 500, 600, maybe even higher if they're large. Watts is just a measure of the output. So the more mass you can put into this thing, so more force, the larger your watt output's going to be. So say those get plugged in. Again, if we're in our ASR Bike Calculator, you'll get this printable sheet. We go through it on the left side. It has all the results that you input from all 3 output tests, the max aerobic speed test. It'll give you what your best max was. It'll give you what your anaerobic speed reserve is. Again, that's max watts minus the average watts. And it will give you your ASR percentage, which is just your anaerobic speed reserve divided by your best max watts as a percentage. Again, higher percentage for the ASR is a good thing if your max aerobic speed is adequate. Like we talked about in this example, for the amount of output that this person has on their max watts test, their max aerobic speed test would be horrendous. So this would not really be, this would almost be like a false positive in terms of they have a great ASR, but in reality, they just have a really bad mass. If you're looking at the right side, you'll see what we use for long interval prescription, short interval prescription, tempo interval prescription. Long intervals, if you're looking at it, it gives you the number of reps that you should hit during a set. And it takes into account the work rest intervals for each set. So if we're just looking at the first example under long intervals, you would do 10 to 15 reps of 1 minute of work, 1 minute of rest, and that's passive rest. We use passive rest, meaning you pretty much do nothing. If you were to stay sitting on the bike, you can like very, very, very lightly pedal to just keep everything going, but you don't need to like keep a certain pace because that will just increase the load during the rest, ultimately leading to decreased output during the actual work interval, which we're more focused on the long intervals. For the short intervals, again, you'll see 2 to 4 sets, same thing, reps times work to restoration. So using the first example, 8 to 16 reps in a set. If you're doing 10 seconds of work, 20 seconds of rest, again, doing passive rest. We give a range for each interval type. So if we go back to the long intervals, the minimum watts that you should be at during any one of these should be 190, and the max number of watts that you should be at is 290. So basically, you want to be within that range during every single rep. There's a bunch of different ways to write your sets and reps and progress them, depending on how someone does with it. We can kind of go through that in another video if you want. Same thing for the short intervals. You'll have a minimum number of watts, which in this case is 560, and a max number of watts, which is 740. So again, during your 10-second work period, if you're using that first example, you need to be between that. You'll probably need to give yourself like a second or two head start during the end of the rest period, so that way you can get up to that wattage range quickly. And then the last interval type that we have are tempo, classic like extensive tempo type. Again, 2 to 4 sets. We have the reps times work to rest on the left side, and then the minimum watts and max watts. Those change based on your work to rest interval because of how high intensity they are relative to the other interval types. You'll have more and more of a drop off. So meaning the longer you go in this extensive tempo interval, you'll have to decrease the wattage that you're at. So if I'm doing a 10-second on, 30-second off, again with passive rest, so you're not pedaling pretty much at all during the rest, I would need to be between 830 and 992 for the 10 seconds. Again, giving yourself probably a few second lead in, so that way it's a rolling start. You're at that for the 10 seconds, and then you're at passive rest for the 30, and you hit whatever you decided on, 15 to 22 seconds. Again, as you go down within each one in the tempo intervals, you'll see the watt range gets lower as you go because the work duration gets longer. These obviously get pretty tough. We didn't really call them extensive tempo intervals because on the bike, it's likely going to be more metabolically taxing. Your heart rate's probably going to be higher. So if we were to classify it as like a heart rate extensive tempo, it wouldn't really make sense. But from a output standpoint, we are looking at certain percentages, and we used a decent amount of Milan and Jovanovich's hit manual to help build some of these, and then we've kind of fine-tuned them as we've gone and tried things out. And the last thing you'll see on the right side is a zone 2-ish pace just based off of max aerobic speed. It gives you a rough guide if you didn't have a heart rate monitor. For some people, it'll be higher than what you need to go. For some people, it might be lower. But we think it's pretty accurate in terms of if you didn't have a heart rate monitor, it's a good guide to use. Again, this is all in our Echo Bike calculator, so that's going to be available to purchase. But when we look at prescribing any of these hit drills that we have in the calculator sheet, sport obviously depends on the flow of it. Is it stop and go? How do the shifts look? What are the playing dimensions? What are the intensities at during the playing flow? For the position, what's the tactical style? If you're looking at a defenseman in hockey versus a center, it's going to also be different. So those are all things we take into account when we pick which interval style we need. Of course, we're going to look at the athlete profile. If someone's extremely deficient in their max aerobic speed, then we might need to target more longer intervals and get them used to be able to maintain that output and increase that output as they go. Maybe we want some shorter intervals. It kind of depends also, again, on the time of year leading to the next one. Is it the off season where we can try to help build up some weaknesses and just build the strengths even more? Or maybe we're in season and we just need to microdose some of our high intensity interval training. That'll kind of depend on what styles we choose. In our opinion, usually tempo is the best bang for the buck in terms of not being too taxing, good work to rest, high average outputs. but it kind of depends on the um, work duration that you're trying to be at as well. And then, of course, taking into account total training load of the individual, if they're low minutes, if they're return to play type individual, um, or if they're just someone who naturally responds well to a higher workload, and you don't want to maybe risk having them do excess ground contact volume, trying to manage any like hamstring stress, lower leg stress. Um, that kind of all goes into how we implement some of the hit drills based off the ASR bike testing. So to wrap that up, hopefully you guys took something out of the first part being the why we test, second part being how we test, third part being how we program based off of it. Um, if you have any questions, you can comment them below. You can reach out to us on Instagram. We could always do a follow-up video answering questions based on it. If you have interest in the ASR calculator, we'll have a link to it so you can buy that as well. If you thought this series was helpful, please share it with anyone who you think would just gain value from it. Again, we're always trying to share what we're doing, what we're working on, and yeah, subscribe if you want more videos from us and to see what we're sharing. Thanks for watching.